Good morning, Hope Church. It's great to see you this morning for another We're Burning Daylight. So, you know what this means. Go ahead and pull out your Live Dead Joy. Turn to August 16th, and we're going to be reading out of Psalm 78, Hosea 7, 1 Corinthians 13. So, go ahead and pull out your Bibles too, right? So we can get reading. So, let's start on Psalm 78. And so we're not going to be reading it all. There's a lot to read there, but we're going to be covering what we need to cover for today. So I encourage you to read everything that's on the Live Dead Joy for today. Starting at verse 1, it says, "Give ear, O my people, to my teachings. Incline your ears to the words of my mouth. I will open my mouth in a parable. I will utter dark sayings from old, things that we have heard and known, that our fathers have told us. We will not hide them from their children, but tell to the coming generation the glorious deeds of the Lord and his might, and the wonders that he has done. He established a testimony in Jacob, and appointed a law in Israel, which he commanded our fathers to teach to their children, that the next generation might know them, the children yet unborn, and arise and tell them to their children, so that they should set their hope in God, and not forget the works of God, but keep his commandments, and that they should not be like their fathers, a stubborn and rebellious generation, a generation whose heart was not steadfast, whose spirit was not faithful to God. The Ephraimites, armed with the bow, turned back on the day of the battle. They did not keep God's covenant, but refused to walk according to his law. They forgot his works and the wonders that he had shown them. In the sight of their fathers, he performed wonders in the land of Egypt, in the fields of Zoan. He divided the sea and let them pass through it. He made the waters stand like a heap. In daytime he led them with a cloud, and all the night with a fiery light. He split rocks in the wilderness and gave them drink abundantly, as from the deep. He made streams come out of the rock and caused waters to flow down like rivers. Yet they sinned still more against him, rebelling against the Most High in the desert. They tested God in their heart by demanding food they craved. They spoke against God, saying, "Can God spread a table in the wilderness?" He struck the rock so that the water gushed out, and streams overflowed. Can he also give bread or provide meat for his people? Therefore, when the Lord heard, he was full of wrath. A fire was kindled against Jacob. His anger rose against Israel, because they did not believe in God and did not trust his power, his saving power. Yet he commanded the skies above and opened the doors of heaven, and he rained down on them manna to eat and gave them the grain of heaven. Man ate of the bread of the angels. He sent them food in abundance. He caused the east wind to blow into the heavens, and by his power he led out the south wind. He rained meat on them like dust, winged birds like the sand of the seas. He let them fall in the midst of their camp, all around their dwellings, and they ate and were well fed, for he gave them what they craved. But before they had satisfied their craving, while the food was still in their mouths, the anger of God rose against them, and he killed the strongest of them, and laid low the young men of Israel. In spite of all this, they still sinned. Despite his wonders, they did not believe. So he made their days vanish like a breath, and their years in terror. When he killed them, they sought him. They repented and sought God earnestly. They remembered that God was their rock, their most high God, their Redeemer. But they flattered him with their words, and they lied to him with their tongues. Their heart was not steadfast toward him. They were not faithful to his covenant, yet he, being compassionate, atoned for their iniquity and did not destroy them. He restrained his anger often and did not stir up all his wrath. He remembered that they were but flesh, a wind that passes and comes not again. How often they rebelled against him in the wilderness and grieved him in the desert. So if you want to read the rest of that, go ahead, pause it, read it. We're moving on to Hosea 7. Let's go ahead and begin reading. Verse 1. When I restore the fortunes of my people, when I would heal Israel, the iniquity of Ephraim is revealed. The evil deeds of Samaria, for they deal falsely, The thief breaks in and the bandits raid outside, but they do not consider that I remember all their evil. Now their deeds surround them. They are before my face. By their evil they make the king glad, and the princes by their treachery. They are all adulterers. They are all like a heated oven, whose baker ceases to stir the fire from kneading of the dough until it is leavened. On the day of our king, the princes became sick with the heat of wine. He stretched out his hand with mockers, for with hearts like an oxen they approach their intrigue. All night their angers smolder. In the morning it blazes like a flaming fire. All of them are hot as an oven, and they devoured their rulers. All their kings have fallen, and none of them calls upon me. Ephraim mixes himself with the peoples. Ephraim is a cake not turned. Strangers devour his strength, and he knows it not. Gray hairs are sprinkled upon him, and he knows it not. The pride of Israel testifies to his face, yet they do not return to the Lord their God, nor seek him for all this. Ephraim is like a dove, silly and without sense, calling to Egypt, going to Assyria. As they go, I will spread over them my net. I will bring them down like the birds of heaven. I will discipline them according to the report made to their congregation. Woe to them, for they have strayed from me. Destruction to them, for they have rebelled against me. I would redeem them, but they speak lies against me. They do not cry to me from their heart, but they wail upon their beds. For grain and wine they gash themselves. They rebel against me, although I trained and strengthened their arms. Yet they devise evil against me. They return, but not upward. They are like a treacherous bow. Their princes shall fall by the sword because of their insolence of their tongue. This shall be the derision in the land of Egypt. All right, and now we are moving on to 1 Corinthians 13. Verse 1 starts with, If I speak in the tongues of men and of angels, but have not love, I am a noisy gong, or a clanging cymbal. And if I have prophetic powers and understand all mysteries and all knowledge, and if I have all faith so as to remove mountains, but have not love, I am nothing. If I gave away all I have, and if I deliver up my body to be burned, but have not love, I gain nothing. Love is patient and kind. Love does not envy or boast. It is not arrogant or rude. It does not insist on its own way. It is not irritable or resentful. It does not rejoice at wrongdoing, but rejoices with the truth. Love bears all things, believes all things, hopes all things, endures all things. Love never ends. As for prophecies, they will pass away. As for tongues, they will cease. As for knowledge, it will pass away. For we know in part, and we prophesy in part, but when the perfect comes, the partial will pass away. When I was a child, I spoke like a child, I thought like a child, I responded like a child. When I became a man, I gave up childish ways. For now we see in a mirror dimly, but then face to face. Now I know in part, then I shall know fully, even as I have been fully known. So now faith, hope, and love abide these three, but the greatest of these is love. So let's go ahead and get on with our devotional for today. It seems unthinkable that we could handcuff God. How can the omnipotent God be limited? One of the mysteries of God is that he sometimes limits himself to our expectations and requests. Matthew 13:58 says, Jesus did not do many mighty works there because of their unbelief. It is not that God cannot act when people do not believe. It's that he chooses not to. A holy God cannot and will not partner with sin. He considers unbelief a flagrant rebellion and insult. Psalm 78 tells us, the Lord heard this and was furious because they did not believe. And they still sinned and did not believe. Verses 21, 22, and 32. Their context refers to God's people, not pagans. This is about men and women in a covenant relationship with God. When God's people, including God's missionaries, do not believe him, he gets furious. He considers unbelief in his followers a flagrant sin. It is more damaging than the unbelief in the unregenerate. His followers know better. When we choose not to believe and belief is a choice, we are likely like silly doves without sense, Hosea 7:11. We cannot harbor the sin of unbelief and expect God to act in power. We limit him when we do not believe. Our unbelief is effectual hate towards the lost. For when we do not believe, God does not act and the nations are not reached. Neither the saved nor the lost can afford unbelief. Belief is love. Love believes all things, 1 Corinthians 13:7. When we love someone, we have no trouble accepting their word. Love takes the best possible meaning from every conversation. Love grants a benefit of doubt. Love refuses to believe what is known. Love refuses to believe what is knows is contrary to the nature of the loved one. We love Jesus by believing him. We know his character, we know he is faithful, and we know we can trust him even when he promises the most outlandish things or asks the most impossible sacrifices. To love Jesus is to believe everything he has said. Where he is loved, he acts in the same way that he refuses to act where he is not loved. He delights to act where he is loved and trusted. In mission, let us delight in the heart of Jesus by loving him enough to believe he will do extraordinary things. Our reward is that he will. Our belief in Jesus prompts him to act among the nations. We can best love the lost by believing Jesus, for they will be the eternal benefactors of our belief. Once again, I say go ahead and read Psalm 78, the rest of it, and then Luke 6 as well. And this week we are praying for the Malay Muslims of Pakistan, 0% evangelical. So it's great being here with you today, Hope Church.